President, please be seated. The court now is back in session, and the floor is given to the Deputy Co-Prosecutor to resume your questioning. You may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Civil Party, just before the break, I was asking you about your hometown of Rusay Dangkot. And I was asking you, and I apologize, I didn't quite understand your last response. I was asking you if it was known amongst the members of your home village who was ethnically Khmer and who was ethnically Vietnamese.
Answer. I told the court already. At the time, there were Lang Thai paper. Lang Thai was the family record book at the time, so they knew who were Khmer and who were Vietnamese.
I just want to make sure I understand correctly. There were family record books in your village that were kept that indicated whether certain individuals were ethnically Vietnamese or ethnically Khmer. Is that correct?
Answer. Houses had been burned down, so I had no more family record books. And at that time, when I pled, I had only a pair of clothes with me that I was wearing.
You mentioned what I heard was the word Lang Kai or Lang Thai, which I heard you describe as record books or family record books, which would indicate whether an individual was ethnically Vietnamese or ethnically Khmer. Is that correct?
Answer. Once again, one would know that the person was ethnically Vietnamese or Khmer since the Lang Thai or family's record books states about that.
And when the Khmer Rouge entered your village, did they have access to these family record books?
Answer. I told the court already at the outset. I was living in Rusay Dangkut in the floating village, and later on I had been relocated to live on land by Khmer Rouge.
Did the Khmer Rouge indicate to you in your home village that they knew who was Vietnamese and who was Khmer?
Yes, yeah, people said that it was said that Khmer and Vietnamese had to perform manual labor. As I said, the Vietnamese family had the possession of Lang Thai, and the Khmer people also had the family's record books.
And did the Khmer Rouge look at the Lang Thai or ask to look at the Lang Thai of the families?
at Lang Thai paper or documents, all of those Lang Thais.
When you and the other Vietnamese families were being told to leave, were you aware of the Khmer Rouge using any lists of names?
Mr. President, I again object to the...
President, please hold on. Mr. Civil Party, you have the floor now, Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. President. I again must object to the words Khmer Rouge, certainly coming from the prosecution. It's maybe one thing if the civil party lawyer does it, but the Khmer Rouge as such cannot commit or cannot have or do the factual jobs or tasks that are being described. We have to be very specific. I just referred to earlier to the meeting, the very high-ranking or possibly the highest-ranking meeting in July or August '75 between Vietnam and Pol Pot and Nguyen Chi. Obviously, there was a completely different thing going on at the highest level. So now to just be very general and speak about the Khmer Rouge, specifically when we're talking about March, April, May, June '75 is really not appropriate. So the prosecution at least should try to be very specific and ask not did the Khmer Rouge do this or do that, but who was it? Which was it even a cadre or was it some local person?
Mr. President, if I may respond, Counsel for Nguyen Che has raised this objection multiple times. It has continuously been overruled. It is a term that the witness seems to, or the civil party, I apologize, seems to understand. If counsel wants to ask clarification questions later on, he may, but I am satisfied that the civil party is able to understand the terminology that I'm using, and I would ask that I be able to proceed on that basis.
President, the objection put by Mr. Kope is overruled in relation to the term used by co-prosecutor. It is a generic term, and we have been using this generic term since the outset to refer to the Democratic Cambodia and also to CPK. And actually, as it is known that the term Khmer Rouge is referring to the particular group, and the chamber made mention already that it will consider this term on case-by-case basis, particularly when it relates to some particular circumstances. You can proceed with your questioning, co-prosecutor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Civil Party, I was asking you when yourself and the other Vietnamese families were forced to move villages, were you ever aware of the Khmer Rouge using lists to identify who had to leave the village?
Answer. There were around 30 families coming from Risay Dong Cui. 7 days after the Khmer New Year, there was a saying that long live the king. If houses had no one living, those houses would be burned down. And at the time, people were evacuated. The Lang Thai were looked at. Those who wanted to live on the mountain, they would be allowed to live on mountains, and those who wanted to live in floating villages, they were allowed to do so.
Mr. Civil Party, before the day that you have described of the arrest of your family and the arrest of a neighboring family, and they were taken to be killed, were you aware of any other arrests of Vietnamese families in the village you were living at on the mountain?
President, please hold on. Civil Party, you have the floor now, Cooper.
I object to this line of questioning. It seems to suggest or seem to imply that if the events described by the Civil Party actually occurred, that his family was arrested because his family was Vietnamese, and that the other families refer to that these people were arrested because they were Vietnamese. It might very well be the case that they were arrested and they happened to be Vietnamese. But the question, also all questions, by the way, from the Civil Party lawyer, seems to imply that if the events did in fact happen, these killings took place because the people involved were Vietnamese, whereas in fact the Civil Party himself has indicated in his Civil Party application that he has no idea why his family was arrested in the first place.
If I may respond, Mr. President, my question was neutral as to whether the individuals were being arrested because they were Vietnamese. The Council for Nguyen Che is the one who is imposing on them the interpretation that is the substance of my question. I simply asked whether the Civil Party was aware of any other individuals or families that were arrested who were Vietnamese. And that is a neutral question that I believe the Civil Party can answer. If the Council for Nguyen Che would like to ask questions about other arrests, he's of course free to do so.
President, the objection by Mr. Cooper is overruled. And I would like to inform the parties that you should not instruct other parties how to put questions to Civil Party or witnesses. I understand that they are aware and know how to put questions to the witnesses and Civil Party before they came on board.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Civil Party, my question